So we're going to do the last bit of this animation here. So the finalizing of this, we're going to do we're going to go ahead and we're going to scale these animation parts of this a little bit. So right now, we kind of have the ball bouncing up and down, and we have the varying degrees of it kind of squashing and stretching and arcing. And so the last thing to do is really edit, these frames in between. The ball should really be covering a different amount of distance each time, and it should be bouncing faster and faster as it gets closer to the ground. So that's why it still appears a bit floaty. So we want to fix all that animation keyframing here. So remember, we have a viewable area here, which is that little slider here. I'm going to expand this a little bit so that I make sure I'm selecting my last frame here when I do my scaling. But basically, we want to scale the animation parts of this. So after the first bounce, squash, and stretch, I want to select the frames after that, and I'm going to select them and then do, so you can edit keyframes, just so you know, before I get too fancy with this. Let's say I wanted to edit the last keyframe, I can shift click, so I basically click and then I shift and drag, and then I can select a portion of keyframes. In this case, I'm just selecting one, so I can move that around by clicking on the middle. Now, if you want to scale a bunch of frames, that's what we're about to do here. So I'll go ahead and I'll shift click here, and I will hold the option key here to scale this. So I'm going to scale these down a little bit, maybe about by a third. So let's say I scale them down to like frame 130 or so, right? So there I'm at frame 130, and so now I have the bounce happening. So the last few frames, now the last few bounces are about, they're a percentage less. I don't know the exact percentage, but I just scale these down from 150 to 130. But each time the ball bounces, I'm going to want to scale that even shorter. So for the next set of frames, I'm going to select, and let's just say we're going to scale these guys down. I'll hold the option key. I'll scale these down to like, say, 120. Okay, so that's going to scale those. They've already been scaled. The next set of frames has been scaled even shorter. So I did the first, the second bounce, and now the third bounce. I'm going to scale that down even shorter. So each time the ball bounces, it's going to be going faster and faster, because each time it hits the ground, it's going to have less distance to travel from the arc. So I'll go ahead and scale these guys down, and I'll hold the option key again and click at the end to scale, and I'll go down to like 110. Okay, so now I've done the first three frames, or first three bounces, and now I'll do the last two. So I'll go ahead and select that guy there, and then I'll scale these down to like, let's say 100, and then the very last bounce I'm going to want to scale. So I'll select him, and I'll go to the last frame here, and I'll scale those down. So I'll go to option, scale them down. And so now I should have a fairly good animation. You can go ahead and, of course, adjust all these aspects. So it jumps a little bit too fast there, and I can always go ahead and scale these out. If something looks unnatural, I can go ahead back and fix that by holding the option key out to scale it back out, and let's see if we get a better result. So play around with that. If you play around with it enough, you'll get a very realistic animation. If you don't scale them, and this is kind of, you have to go back and forth, but it's pretty easy to edit this. I might have scaled some of these too fast. So if you analyze your animation, you can kind of go in there and then decide which parts are too fast or which parts are too slow, and just kind of select them and scale them. And that is it. That is it for the animation bouncing ball.